Hey, so I put out a video talking about the best settings for the Sony A6400. You might have seen it. I don't know if you have, but a lot of people have been asking me to go more in depth about those settings and what everything means. So that's what we're doing today. These settings should work for pretty much all of the Sony Alpha line. You might have to tweak things a little bit because there are different programmable buttons and such, and the menu looks a little bit different, but the base concept here should be the same. So to start off, you're gonna go into the video tab up at the top. Under the first tab, actually, file format should be 4K and the record settings should be at 24 frames per second at 100 megabytes per second. So obviously you want to select 4K because you want the best possible image that you can get out of this camera. And then 24 frames per second, that's industry standard. Pretty much everybody is filming in 24 frames per second, and that is the most natural frame rate for the human eye. And then with the 100 megabits per second, or megabytes, I don't know, that's the most data that you're gonna be recording. So everything is gonna look a lot better and you're gonna be able to color grade it a lot more down the road. You're gonna go down a little bit to the S&Q settings. You're gonna change that to 24 frames per second at 120 frames per second. Might have sounded a little bit confusing, but it's not all that confusing. The S&Q mode does some interesting stuff. So it does internal slow motion or time lapses. So what this is basically saying is that the final video is going to be reduced to 24 frames per second from 120 frames per second. Now, if you do want slow motion, but you don't want it to be recorded internally and played back in slow motion, and you want to like do that all yourself and slow it down in post yourself, you can actually go back up to that file format and choose 1080p, and then the record settings, choose 120 frames per second. This is going to let you record audio, and it's not going to slow it down for you, so you're going to have to go back in post to slow it down. Going over to the next tab, your autofocus drive speed should be normal, and then your tracking sensitivity should be responsive. I did a little bit of testing, and having that drive speed in the middle seems to be the best. When it's on high, it's just too fast, and when it's on low, it's just too slow. So in the middle we have it. But the tracking sensitivity, I actually have that to responsive, because this, like, I want it to be searching. Like, I don't want it to be slow with the tracking, because that might make it slower when it goes to actually pull focus. So I want it to be very quick with finding what it's supposed to track, and then, you know, like ease into that. On to the next tab, we're gonna do audio level display. We're gonna turn that on. This is very simple. It's just gonna show what your audio levels are on your actual display. So you will be able to see if things are peaking or if they're just not loud enough. Then your movie with shutter. This is a personal preference, but I highly recommend it. All this is doing is it is remapping your movie video record button setting thing to the very front shutter, the same button that you would take photos with. And I find that just makes life a whole lot easier, because the little record button on the side just is not it. On to tab 5, you're gonna find some zoom settings. We're gonna turn on clear image zoom with this. Now, clear image zoom is very handy. And what it allows you to do is zoom in 1.5 times without losing any image quality. It is an internal zoom on the camera, and I don't know, it's just nice to have that feature and to be able to get that much further if you actually need it. This is really cool for prime lenses, because now you have a prime lens, but you also can zoom in a little bit. So it's kind of like this gray area, and it adds just a little bit of dynamics to that prime lens if you need it, I guess. Okay, on to the next tab. There is a setting called Finder/Monitor, and we're gonna change this to monitor only. This is really good for video. So you'll notice there's this little eyepiece on the back of the camera, and it's intended for you to look through it. It's your viewfinder. It's good for photos and such. It, you know, sometimes when you're out in the daylight and the sun's really bright, you can't see your screen, so that's when you'd want to use your viewfinder. But it's not always on. It's an electronic viewfinder, so it has this sensor, and anytime something gets in front of that viewfinder, your screen turns off and the viewfinder turns on. You may not want that, so I have that turned off and I have my monitor always on. So no matter if anything goes in front of that sensor, my monitor doesn't turn off. On to tab 8. This is the custom keys. Number 1 is autofocus and manual focus toggle. Pretty self-explanatory. I think your camera comes like that actually. So you're just gonna switch between autofocus and manual focus. Sometimes you don't always need autofocus. Sometimes it doesn't really work how you really need it to work. And sometimes you wanna use that autofocus to set the focus, and then you can switch it to manual focus so that focus doesn't change. Number 2, zoom. So we just turned on clear image zoom, and now we need a way to access that. So we're gonna take this toggle switch and flip it down, and then you can press the button and now you're in zoom mode, and you can, change that zoom for the clear image zoom. And the number 3, that is a little trash can at the bottom, that is gonna be our zebras. And zebras are a way to monitor exposure. So anytime anything is overexposed, there are gonna be these little lines or zebras that pop up and just tell you, hey, this is overexposed. You might wanna fix that. On to the next tab. This is the little wheel on the back. So number 1 is focus magnifier. This really only comes into play when you have manual focus. This is the center button of the wheel, by the way. And so when you're in manual focus, it might be kind of hard to see if things are in focus, especially if you're just working off of the camera and not an external monitor. So what this is gonna do is it's gonna punch in. It's gonna punch in like 5 times maybe, but it's gonna get really close, and you're gonna be able to see if that thing is in focus or not. Number 2, I have that set to peaking display. This is yet another thing to help you get your shots in focus, and they are these little lines that pop up as outlines of anything that is in focus. I have my color set to red for those. I'm not sure if we're gonna go over that later or not, but with this, anything that is highlighted in red or outlined in red is in focus, and anything that's not is not in focus. It's just a whole bunch of tools to help you get your shots in focus and make sure that these are, in fact, in focus, because that is kind of an important part of making videos. Number 3 is ISO, and I think that comes standard. So your ISO is part of your exposure triangle thingy. You're gonna change your exposure triangle and just make sure things aren't too dark, and make sure things aren't blown out. I can probably do a whole separate video about the exposure triangle if you guys are interested, so just let me know in the comments below. So the reason I have my ISO right on the back is just because it gives me really quick access. And the number 4 is my white balance. So again, we're just looking for really quick access to stuff. Your white balance makes sure that your whites are actually white. So you might be in situations where you need to change that really quickly. And I like having the convenience of it right there on the back without having to go into separate menus. All right, and then we're gonna go over one more time. And this is gonna be C1. So this is the button at the front right next to the shutter button, and I have this set to gamma display assist. Essentially what this is gonna do is you're gonna set it to the same as your picture profile. So picture profiles kind of make things a little bit harder, especially with your exposure. So what this does is it compensates for that, and it gives you a better image without writing it, without burning it into the video file. So it's just an assist feature that pops up on your screen without affecting the final video, and it helps you get things correct like your exposure. All right, so we're still in that same base tab. We're gonna go down to function menu. You can set this however you want to set this. I have a few redundant things just to have them, but the main things that I have in here that I use all the time is your focus area and your audio record level. So your focus area, obviously, things have to be in focus. Even when you're using autofocus, you have to tell it where to focus. I always have my focus set to the boxes. I don't know what it's called right now, but there are these boxes that you can change. There's like 9 of them. But obviously there's different ones. There's center focus and zone focus and a whole bunch of different options. You can even tap the back of your screen to get things in focus. And then audio record level, this is actually changing the microphone input level on the camera. Sometimes you're using an external microphone, sometimes you're using an internal microphone, sometimes your environment is really loud, sometimes it is really quiet. So having quick access to change and adapt that audio input level is really important. All right, so we're finally changing things. So we're gonna go up to the top into the 3rd tab. Under the first page, we're gonna find a little thing called airplane mode. We're gonna go ahead and turn airplane mode on. I'm pretty sure this is gonna disable your Wi-Fi from your camera, but what it's gonna do is extend your battery life. If you wanna use the app on your phone with your camera, you're gonna wanna turn this off, but if you're not doing that, then having this on is gonna give you just that little extra push of battery life, and we all know that we need this with this camera. All right, so again, up at the top, we're gonna go over to the 5th tab. Under the very first page, find monitor brightness. Obviously, you can change it manually, but I'm gonna set mine to sunny. So this is just the brightness of the monitor. You can change this as you wish, but I have mine set to sunny. All right, over to the 4th page. We're gonna make sure that remote control is on. I have a remote for my camera. You should get one. It's like $30. It is really, really helpful. Just get one. And then USB power supply. I would assume that this is for hooking up an external power supply to your camera. That's what I get out of it. I should probably research it a little bit if I'm telling you, but I have mine set to on. If you didn't know, you can use an external power supply with this camera. All you have to do is plug it in. Like I said, we need longer battery life with this camera. But there are workarounds just like an external battery supply. So with this, you can multiply your battery life by 5 or 10 or whatever the case may be. The only thing I will say about this is make sure that your camera is off when you plug in your power supply. If your camera is already on and you try to plug in that power supply, it's not gonna recognize it. So make sure that your camera is off when you plug in the power supply, and make sure that there's like a little charging logo up in the corner, and that'll make sure that you're actually using the power supply as you want to. Well, that seemed pretty in-depth to me. It's a little bit more than just telling you guys settings. I felt like that was in-depth. Did you think that was in-depth? Let me know in the comments below, and maybe we'll be making a part 3 to this where I go even more in-depth. Who really knows? Also, let me know what you want me to do for my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Go enjoy shooting on your new camera. But with that being said, I don't have an outro, so I don't know why I set that up. Yeah, all right, and all right.